determining what is part of the project and what's not part of the project. We've got a schedule baseline, so how long it's going to take us, and then a cost baseline. And Microsoft Project can help us to maintain all three. The scope baseline and Microsoft Project you see in your activities and your outline structure. Your schedule baseline in your Gantt charts and in your network diagram. And your cost baseline, if you have got your tasks identified and you have got resources identified and you've assigned the resources to the tasks, and these resources do have cost rates to them, then Microsoft Project can give us our cost baseline, a time-phased cost baseline that we could work with. So Microsoft Project can help us with all three. As I said just now, you can do all of this by hand also. It's just so much more work if you want to do it by hand, specifically if you want to keep it updated every time that you do progress reporting and you add on to it. So what we're going to do going through this course is we're going to look at the introduction, and there we will look at units 1 and 2, giving us background of what project management is all about, not the whole of project management, just giving us an overview of how does this tool, because that's what Microsoft Project is. It's a tool. It cannot take over the management of my project. It can just help me to manage my project, specifically the scheduling and the cost part, much more efficiently. Then we're going to start creating a project file to see how we can do that, and we're going to look at some of the background information, the defaults. How do we set them? How do we make certain that everything is fine, so that once we start working on this project, the defaults and everything is in place already. We are then going to go over and look at calendars. How do we create calendars? Calendars on project level, calendars, we could have calendars on resource level, we could have calendars on task level. And those calendars is where we define when do people work, what is the working time, from what time to what time, when do they take lunch, and all of that. So Microsoft Project could schedule the people for the time that they are available for working and not the time that they're not available for working. Also, we're going to look at how do we put resources in, how do we register them, how do we put in their availability, how do we put in their cost, and all of those type of things. We also need to look at creating our tasks, putting all the activities in, all the different ways that we can do that. We can type it in, we can import it, we can copy and paste, and all of that. Then we're also going to look at the dependencies between these tasks to see how do they relate to one another. And those dependencies, like these little arrows we've got here on the network diagram, they determine the relationship. That's my program logic that I've put in. And that's going to determine how this project, or it's a picture, it gives me a picture of how I intend to execute this project. Now, if we've got our activities registered on Microsoft Project and we've got our resources registered, we still do not get any meaningful information out of Microsoft Project. Once we start assigning the resources to the tasks or to the activities, and I'd use the term task or activity interchangeably, meaning basically the same thing. So once I assign my resources to these activities, that's only when I start getting meaningful information in my Gantt charts, my other reports, and also in my cost reports from Microsoft Project. Then we're also going to look at constraints and the type of constraints that we got in Microsoft Project. We could have different date constraints. We're going to see those constraints. We know that on a project there are numerous constraints. Normally we are constrained by the time available, by the people available, the cost, and all of that. So all of those constraints is part and parcel of how we set up the whole of Microsoft Project. But in Microsoft Project, you can also bring additional constraints in. Date constraints. This task can only start on this day, or must start after this day, or must start before this day. So you can bring all of those additional constraints, date constraints in also. Then once we have now finalized our planning, because we are still looking at planning, once we've got a plan that is a feasible plan, a plan where we don't have any resource over allocations, a plan where the time frame is within the time frame that our client wants from us, that our cost is within our budget, we can now get it approved. Approval on Microsoft Project means we're going to baseline it. And that baseline is what we're going to use to compare against, to see if there are any